opening prayer. We give thanks for the contribution by pioneers, early settlers, and for those who fought in the various wars, for the fabric of the Tenterfield community we have today. May the words of our mouths and the meditation of our hearts be accepted in thy sight, O Lord. Amen. Acknowledgement of country, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land. We give thanks for the contribution by pioneers, early settlers, for those who fought in the various wars, and emerging, for the fabric of the Tenterfield community, Kamilaroi and Bundjalung nations. May the words of our mouths and the meditation of our hearts be accepted in thy sight, O Lord. Councillors, we do have two apologies. Councillor Country, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land. We give thanks for the contribution by pioneers, early settlers. Thank you, second by Councillor Raven, and I thank you. All in favour, Kamilaroi and Bundjalung nations. May the words of displays and declarations of interest, councillors. None. Open council reports. We're dealing with the item in front of us, councillors. It's item ENV 20/19. Rural security and amendments to level 4.5 offences. All in favour? Councillors, can I have a move and a second to deal with the recommendations, please? Councillor Berry, I thank you. Second by Councillor Brian Murray, and I thank you. Councillors, with the report, our manager of water and waste will deal with items 1A and B. Amendments from number 2 will be dealt with our 6. We'd like to see a move and a second to deal with and great to see you here, Julian, and second by Councillor Brian Murray, and I know it's been a pretty tough gig, but as mayor and I know all the councillors will support you and commend you on the job that you've been doing over the last month and all your staff, because they have been doing an excellent job. Second, but we're not there yet. No, I know it's been okay. So I hand over to Julian, our manager of water and waste, and commend you on the job that you've been doing over the last month and pushing on all your staff, because they have been doing an excellent job. Second, but we're not there yet. No, I know okay. So I hand over to Julian, our manager of water and waste, and commend you on the job that you've been doing over the last month and pushing on all your staff,
proposal A and B, which is eliminate the light strong watering troughs now, because we had a fixed part of up and running, teething problems last week with it, but fully functional take this. Proposal A, we're actually using eliminate the light strong watering troughs there as well, because we had a fixed part up and running, and this will teething problems remove weeks the amount of fully functional take this livestock and drought post battle team. We're actually using eliminate the light strong watering troughs there as well, because we had a fixed part up and running, and this will teething problems remove weeks the amount of fully functional take this livestock and handheld watering. We're actually using eliminate the light strong watering troughs there as well, because we had a fixed part up and running, and this will teething problems remove weeks the report I provided, I put the consultants into the handheld sediment studies using and we found that there's a lot more sediment so that we had previous and there was roughly about 7%. In the report I provided, I put this means that reduces our total sediment study. So we have, we are currently 26 sediment, so we can take 70% off as sediment layer, which is 7%. The report I provided, I put 19%, so reduces getting closer to our limit by restrictions. So we have, because we don't now, we are currently 26, start the level 5 until we take 70% off to it, because that's a stop everything just 7%, because we report I provided is from 19%, so at our worst getting closer to our limit by restrictions. So we have, because we don't now, we are currently 26, start the level 5 until we take 70% off to it, and we have our ranges, we go around and they inspect places who we've got 19 still at our worst handing places, and most of those pictures have been doing that because we don't have water, so we 26 start the level that would allow to take 70% off to it, and we have our tried ranges, we go around and they inspect places who we've got 19
Thank you, Julian. Councillor, before we go to Wayne questions to do with A and B, would you need to move an amendment? It's just a typo there with A. We're using automatic stop drops in Mainsville. We're maximum moving up to the 1st of November, so not the 22nd. So can I have a thank you, Julie, Councillor Sawyer, thank you. Second by Councillor Berry, all in favour? And very good, Julie again. Thank you, Councillor. Any questions to Julie to do with the automatic comments made for the presentation by A and B in November? Councillor McNish, I'll go to you. So can I have a thank you, Julie, Councillor Sawyer, microphone, Councillor, second by Councillor Berry, thank you. A lot of people have commented on
This is still allowed now. I think every councillor would have had that request or comment by people. I know you've got to go through public consultation, that sort of thing, but this is very urgent. I know myself, I see the dam going down every day from my place out there. And could we move that back to the 1st of November or even earlier?
I don't see why we can't move that earlier, because that decision's up to council to provide that. So if that's what you'd like to do, we'd be happy with that.
Well, I'd like to move an amendment there that that be moved forward to the 1st of November as well.
Second by Councillor Reagan. Councillor Sawyer, we'll deal with the amendment first up. Do you want to speak on the amendment?
Yes. I'd like to propose, Mr Mayor, that the original amendment include A and B. So we don't need an amendment on the amendment.
Okay. You happy with that, Councillor McNish? Yep. Righto. We'll deal with Councillor Sawyer with the go back to the original amendment, which was moved by you, Councillor Sawyer, to include A and B to the 1st of November. Councillors, you happy with that? Do I have a seconder for that amendment? Do you want to stick with the same councillor? Thank you. Okay, councillors, before we vote on that amendment, because it is a new amendment to include both, Councillor Sawyer, do you speak to the amendment?
Thanks, Mr Mayor. It's really self-explanatory, as Councillor McNish has said. You know, separating A and B, I thought that we should have both of them together. Everybody loves their gardens, but water is far more important than our gardens for our community. So I think it's a no-brainer that we have A and B in from the 1st of November. The rangers will go around and perhaps they don't issue a fine from the 1st of November. They give a warning and say don't do it again.
Yep.
Because to wait another 3 weeks to say now you can't use your hoses is ridiculous.
Yep.
It's going to use the water up faster than we need it to be done. I just think it's a no-brainer.
Okay. Councillor Rogan being the second, did you wish to speak to the amendment?
No, I think that's been explained quite well. Thanks, Mr Mayor.
Okay, no speakers against the amendment. Councillor Sawyer will put the amendment all in favour. I'm sorry, Councillor Berry, to do with the amendment?
Yeah.
Yep.
I'm against the amendment. I think we should bring it in a bit earlier. That's, in that respect, I thought it would be better if we brought it in by, say, the 20th of this month. I know it's impossible, so...
Councillor, and utmost respect, to do with the time frame, you know, it's roughly about a 2-week period, and to be supportive of Councillor Sawyer and Councillor Rogan with the amendment, I think that gives our rangers plenty of time, and our community, who we work with, plenty of time. Speaking to the community all the time, to do with the stock troughs, they're fully on side with that and preparing now to do that. So there's been great support, and they fully understand the serious condition that we're in, and to be supportive of that, and very appreciative of the water available at Apex Bull to keep the stock going. Well, councillors, we'll put the amendment. We're voting on the amendment for A and B to move that time frame to do with the banning of it up to the 1st of November. All in favour? Again? Carried. Thank you, councillors. Councillors, we'll do with number 2 in the report, and I'll hand over to our CE to present this, please.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. In further to what the Manager of Water and Waste mentioned, we think we've got 19.3% left in the dam. We're unsure of the capacity of the water filtration plant to efficiently and effectively filter the last 5% due to the massive increase in turbidity expected from the water that's basically sitting on the top of the sediment. If it's 5%, that basically means we've got 14% of filterable water left. I say that with a couple of provisos though. When we calculated that we only had 126 days water left in the dam, we measured the staff, or the increments if you like, on the dam wall, which aren't exponential, they're empirical, and basically what that means is if you've got a swimming pool and you've got a depth meter on the side of a swimming pool, as you go down you've got the same ratio of water till you get to the bottom because it's a square vessel. The dam's a flat V and it's very unusually shaped. So relying on the numbers that are on the side of the dam wall to indicate how much water you got left isn't technically correct, because as the dam drops, you exponentially get less surface area and a greater proportion of silt as you go down, because the silt's only in the bottom. So, as well as the fact that we've got 94,000 cubic metres of silt in the bottom of the dam, which is quite a fair bit, and we're unsure of how well the water filtration plant can cope with the last 5%, we're also unsure that we've got 14%, because we're relying on a measurement that assumes that there's the same volume of water as it goes down. So if we think we've got 126 days based on a logarithmic scale versus an exponential scale, it's very difficult to work out. But the figure's probably closer to between 90 and 110 days, not 126 days, which basically means we've got between 3 and 3.5 months before we completely run bone dry. Council, as everybody knows because they've seen the drill ring around town, we've been drilling here, there and everywhere. We've hired some of the best brains in the country, probably the best exploration geologists that Australia's ever seen to help us with that. We've hit an underground river with every bore we've sunk, meaning that the sonic testing was 100% correct. We've never missed a water course. All but one so far, actually two. The first one we hit was we thought would be 10 litres a second and ended up being a 3.1 litres a second. That was at the archery club. The next 6 or 7 bores we thought we'd hit a lot of water, we hit none. One of them, which was in the southern part of town, at 41 metres we hit river sand, which was very, very pleasing. Drilled another 69 metres and hit the bottom of the rock underneath the old underground river. We got 0.1 of a litre a second, which is basically, that glass has got 0.2 of a litre, so we got half a glass a second out of it, which wouldn't have been enough to run a stock trough. We've been down, or we've left now the Tenterfield Transport Museum, and there's 3 bores fairly close to each other. One's behind the shear, or one's just south of the shearing shed in the showground, is it the shearing pavilion?
Yep.
One's directly behind the Tenterfield Transport Museum building, and one's closer to the road near the power lines on
Douglas Street.
Douglas Street on the southern end. We think we might get water out of that, and we're more than 50% confident, but it's in the same water course as the water we're getting out of Shirley Park. Meaning that if we think we're going to get 5.5 litres a second out of the Tenterfield Transport Museum, but we end up sucking out of the same bucket that we're getting out of Shirley Park, we've just gone a little bit further upstream when we're sucking the same water. I think it started yesterday, didn't it, David, the testing?
I think tomorrow.
Tomorrow. So what we're intending to do is to take the pump out of Shirley Park bore, because it's a bigger pump than our test pumps, drop the pump in behind the Tenterfield Transport Museum, put a monitor in the Shirley Park bore to test to see if we're sucking out of the same body of water. If we're sucking out of the same body of water and it's more than what we can get out of Shirley Park, that's good. If we're sucking out of the same body of water but it's the same, that's bad, because in actual fact we drilled 3 holes and ended up with the same amount of water at the end. We don't know that. We've also got permission for test bores on the southern end of East Street where it meets Billawillinga Road, and the common, which is basically as you drive up Billy Willinga Road, there's a big right-hander at the top of the hill. If you go straight ahead, there's a house. We're looking at putting a couple of test bores up there as well, and maybe even one, depending on how we go there, maybe even one a bit further up Billy Willinga Road. We met with the EPA last Friday, wasn't it, Dave? Under the Environmental Protection Act, technically speaking, we should pipe the water to the dam from the test bores. We've been given dispensation because it's the same water that would permeate the dam anyway, to run it down to the creek along the edge of Billy Willinga Road. So we're hoping, but there's no surety in this, and we've proven that for 6 bores in a row, or 7 it might have been. We're hoping that we get enough water out of either behind the Tenterfield Transport Museum, and we're not sucking water out of the same bucket that Shirley Park's in, or failing that, the 3 new ones up Billy Willinga Road prove a good source of water. So we're not done yet, but we keep hitting dry underground streams and dry underground rivers. And we know they're underground rivers because we're finding river sand every time. We're about to go to tender for a new water filtration plant, and I'll use this analogy. When a car manufacturer designs a car, they design a car with a spare tyre in the boot in case you need it. And the specifications are the same size wheels as the rest of the wheels on the car, or even a slow speed wheel, so that when you get a puncture you can swap like for like. We only design a new water filtration plant every 80 or 90 years because they last forever. This one's about 89 years old, I think. Is that right, Gillian? That's correct. So we've got a choice. We can either design something that doesn't cover everything, or design something that covers everything. Every water source. It doesn't cost any more to design extra into the plant, but it costs more to retrofit the plant if you don't design it in the first place. Okay. Because a design option will give you a shopping list. If you've got fluoride in the water, you've got to do this. If you've got molybdenum, you've got to do this. If you've got calcium carbonate, you've got to do this. If you've got radionuclides, you've got to do this. If you've got alpha and beta radiation, you've got to do this. If you've got manganese, you've got to do this. And based on the water sources, the consultant will come up with a design for the cheapest operating plant you can get to satisfy the Australian drinking water guidelines. Now, I wasn't here on Tuesday when there was a meeting with the heads of Department of Health, Department of Industry, Water, and all of our consultants and all of our staff to talk about the specification for the plant. But that was finished on Tuesday. Now, the consultant will now go away, and now that the Department of Health has said, well, if you get all of these things, this is the minimum you've got to do, and DIW said if you get all these things in the water, this is the minimum. And we don't know what we're going to get yet, because if we do hit water behind the Tenterfield Transport Museum, during the 72-hour drawdown test, we take samples of it and we get that tested. And there's 2 main reasons that you do a 72-hour drawdown test. The first one is because you've got to make sure that it isn't just like bursting a bubble and there's lots of water there at the beginning and you go and spend hundreds of thousands of dollars of pumping it and you pump it for 2 days and find you've got nothing. So that's the first thing. You've got to make sure that the rate of pumping is the same as the rate of replenishing the water underground, so you never ever run dry. Well, I shouldn't say never ever, because between 1973 and about 4 months ago, Mooree's gone from minus 12 metres below ground with the artesian basin to minus 38. A very straight line graph with very little recharge, even from all the floods they've had in the last 50 years or 47 years. So when I say forever, there's no such thing as forever with underground aquifers, and the Great Artesian Basin is proving that, and Moree will be in trouble when it gets down to 40, because the hydrogeologists will have to put the skids on it at that level. So we'll test the water behind the Tenterfield Transport Museum. If we get any water up Billy Willinga Road, that'll have to be a drawdown test, and we'll have to test that as well. so that whatever's in the water, and we suspect there'll be calcium carbonate, which in plain language is the stuff that looks like calcite in your shower underneath your tap that's dripping, but mind you, no one should have dripping taps because we're saving water. Molybdenum, if your water tastes really sweet, it's usually because of lead or molybdenum in the water. We've got very little amounts of it here, so it doesn't taste sweet. I've lived in areas where the water tastes sweet, and that's caused more investigations. Cassilis was the name of the place, and it's got naturally high lead in the water, believe it or not, which is not good for childhood development. Radionuclides and alpha radiation A and B, we've had that forever. That's why the mushroom that comes out of Shirley Park is east of the water filtration plant, because it's got a half-life of 4 hours. And the idea is the water comes into the atmosphere, runs across the rocks, so we only turn it on when the dam's low anyway. And by the time it gets to the plant, the radioactivity level's below the health requirements, or so low in fact that we can't even measure it because it's off the end of the scale, and we've been testing that forever, and we've got records going back to well before 1993 about that. Wastewater or recycled water, there's a lot of emotion about it. The Mayor and I met with a gentleman called Mr. Jack Morfitt from the Telegraph last Friday week or last Thursday week. And we spoke for 2.5 hours. The recycling component of it was about a 5-minute or less component. The Telegraph chose to sensationalise it, which was sad. We normally don't meet with a single media outlet like that, but we were asked to because the Telegraph did such a good story a few months before on Ground Zero for Dubbo and other towns. We were a little bit suspicious, but we were assured that he'd do a good job. He did a good job in selling newspapers, but he did a bad job for selling Tenterfield, which we issued a press statement on Sunday, but by then it was too late. Toilet to tap was everywhere. In actual fact, he was technically incorrect anyway. There's no intention, mainly because of cost, but it's not ideal to take water from sewage treatment works and put it straight in a water filtration plant. And it's quite a simple reason. The water from a filtration plant, from the sewage treatment works, if it goes through a reverse osmosis plant, or if it's so clean that it doesn't need to, it's a very good idea from a water filtering point of view to put it through reed beds, or it's called biological sequential filtration, because the natural environment actually takes out stuff better, even better than what mechanical means do at water filtration plants. For example, if the water got deposited 5 kilometres upstream, it would take a while for the reed beds to establish themselves well, but the water coming out of the reed beds or through any biological sequential filtration, and David Wolferton, one of our engineers, is a bit of an expert on this, the water coming out of that's actually cleaner than the water that's in the rest of the dam. A new water filtration plant, and there's a classic example of this with the Sydney desal plant. The water is so clean after it's gone through the Sydney desal plant, they've actually got to add trace elements back in because there's zero anything in the water, and the water's designed to have trace elements in it because your body's used to drinking water with the good trace elements in it, not bad trace elements. So council got a bit of a hatchet job on the weekend, which we're very upset about. Contacted the Minister's office on Sunday morning. She was ropeable and contacted the Sunday Telegraph, who changed the website, but the printed version can't be changed, and that's history, and we'll never be able to change that. Since then, the Mayor, myself and the Deputy Mayor, we met with the Minister for Water, We've met with Janelle Saffin, and we've spoken to the office of Adam Marshall as well. Janelle Saffin and Melinda Pavey are issuing a joint press release, possibly as early as today, in support of investigating recycled water alternatives. Adam Marshall has already issued a press release, and in his press release he's also said that Armidale City is investigating the same thing at the moment. In addition to that, and not because council contacted them, but because they would have seen the media on Sunday, there's an organisation called the Water Directorate, which is basically an association of every local water utility in the country. It's a bit like an engineers association or a chartered professional accountants association or a surgeons association. They're a water association that specialises in town water. They've produced a document explaining what recycled water is, which we'll take to the community meeting tonight. So the idea to investigate recycled water is opportune because, just like the car with a spare tyre, we don't know what's going to happen in the future with future droughts. We don't know what's going to happen with our bores here, although I've got great confidence in David that we'll get 11 or 12 litres a second and add that to Shirley Park. We've got an opportunity to include in that shopping list of things that need to be filtered in the new water filtration plant to ensure the specification for a new plant's correct, such that if the bores, even if we do find bore water and it fails, we've got a plan C. At the moment, the bores are a plan B. Plan A is we get heaps of rain and it runs into the dam and everyone's happy. Plan B is to sink some bores, and this is there's some irony in this, and even in the times of non-drought, use the bore water to top the dam up so the dam's the same level all the time. Now, if the dam's the same level all the time, that means council and I forget the name of the state government agency, but Michael from the fishing people have already been in contact with them. That means council can seek grants to put a boardwalk around the dam, and with a new filtration plant we won't have any trouble allowing recreational fishing and canoeing and non-motorised stuff in the dam, because the dam level will be the same all the time. It'll encourage local tourism and recreation use of the dam. So there's some really good things with that. Plan C, in relation to, and it's not only just recycled water, but it's also urban stormwater runoff. We've got quite a few sporting grounds that are in the lower area of town that would be quite easy to convert into retention basins or retardation basins that we could hook up when we're not using the bores, because there's a rising main that goes from Shirley Park, to hook the retention basins up to the rising main from Shirley Park and pump that into the dam as well, so that when we get even moderate levels of rain, the retention basins fill up, we pump that to the dam and top that up. We can't do any of this at the moment, which is again why the Mayor and I were so upset with the Telegraph story, because our current water filtration plant is struggling filtering what we've already got. So we can't add any other potpourri of stuff for it to filter. It's not practical. It's failing now as it is with the turbidity. I probably should mention what turbidity is. The turbid water that's in the dam at the moment looks no different to the normal water that's in the dam that comes out of the filtration plant. You can't see it with the naked eye. It's only just above the Australian Drinking Water Guideline standards. But turbidity is this. There's particles that float in the water, and if they're too big and they stick together, there may be a pathogen stuck between the two particles. And if there's a pathogen stuck between two particles that are glued together, when it gets chlorinated through the water filtration plant, the chlorine doesn't kill the pathogen. Think of it as a bucket of tennis balls with a golf ball in the middle of it, and you spray the outside of the tennis balls with something, which is a metaphor for the chlorine going in the water. The golf ball's not going to be touched by the stuff that's on the outside. So until the size of the particles that are in the water, which is called turbidity, until they get down to less than 0.2 NTUs, and what does that mean, Gillian? NEFLA, metric unit of measurement, whatever that is. It's after a guy. Oh, okay, named after Mr. Netralet. Okay. Until I get down to less than 0.2, we can't be sure that there's not two particles stuck together, and we can't be sure there's not a pathogen in between the two particles. That's what turbidity means. You do not need much of a change in the environment of the dam for the turbidity to skyrocket. We only had about between 2 and 5 millimetres of rain and a bit of wind, and the turbidity went from about 0.15 to 0.9 overnight. It dropped back to 0.35 again, and we were well on the way to lifting the boil water alert off. And then the last fire we had on the west, the wind blew wind-borne contaminants that landed on the dam, and it went from 0.35 back to 0.4 overnight, which is not very much, but when 0.2 is the standard, it's twice what the standard is. So council doesn't control what we can do with the water, the Department of Health does. And the Department of Health says thou shalt issue a boil water alert when it goes over 0.2. That's the end of story. Now, the Department of Health have got us doing a whole lot of other tests as well. They're very good because they're single-minded. They're only concerned with one thing, which is why they exist, and that's public health. It's great that the governance and the operations in relation to water filtration plants around the company is removed from councils, because it means there's a second party that's looking after health and the primary party is looking after the operations. Department of Industry Water, they're the ones that advise council on what sort of gadgets will be needed for that potpourri list of things that's in the water to fix it later on. So Department of Health say what the standards have got to be. Department of Industry Water suggest to council what type of apparatus and instruments will allow us to reach those standards. Now, the third thing on item 2 is piping from alternate dams. And again, there's a little bit of irony in this. There's a meeting tonight that originally was going to be on economic development. It's now on water. So that this conversation can be repeated and council can accept questions. Piping from alternate dams, council's been quietly working away, and it's very public now. It's on every newspaper within 1,000 kilometres of here at the moment. It's got on their front page, or at least on their website today. Council's been working on a project called New Grid, which is shortened for New England National Water Grid Project. You would have heard the Deputy Prime Minister, Barnaby Joyce, David Littleproud, John Barilaro, Melinda Pavey, Gladys Berejiklian, Colton, is it John or Mark? Mark Colton, and even others. You would have heard them talk about the Border Rivers Mole River Dam project. The Border Rivers Mole River Dam project is actually the New England National Water Grid project. It's one of the same thing. And that project isn't just to build a dam wall. Some of the press releases have got the bits in it about piping it to Stanthorpe and other places as well. But it's to take water from 26 kilometres, or some water, from 26 kilometres west of here back to Tenterfield, which will change our whole economy for the better, because water is gold. It's a long way off. It would have been a lot longer off, but the Mayor and myself and the Deputy Mayor intervened after we saw the website on Monday from Water New South Wales saying the project was going to take 4 years. We met with Melinda Pavey this week, and I'm happy to say that yesterday afternoon at 2:15 it went through Parliament, and they've included the two dams, Wangler and what was the other one, starts with D? Dungowan and Mole River. They've included it in the same legislation that labels it as a state significant project, and what they're aiming to do with that is to do all the planning inside of 6 months. So Personally, I don't know how Water New South Wales is going to go from 4 years to 6 months, but that's their problem. It's enshrined in legislation as from yesterday at 2:15, and there's a press release out from Minister Pavey's office, and it's right across the national press. Just about every paper's got mention of that in it. The Mayor, Deputy Mayor and myself spoke with Melinda Pavey, the Minister for Water, and the member for Lismore in Melinda Pavey's office yesterday afternoon at 2:30 to talk to them about the recycled water, urban stormwater and piping from New Grid. Subsequently, the Minister for Water and the member for Lismore got their photos taken together because they're going to issue a bipartisan press release this morning supporting the investigation into it. There's a long way to go yet because, as I said, it's Plan C. Now, the other thing is with a Plan C, and Council's written to, well, I've written to DIW and Department of Health about this. It's expensive, Plan C. It's more expensive than bore water. It's further away from the dam than the bores are at the moment if they're successful. And it would largely, at the moment, if we hit water tomorrow, it would largely be unnecessary at this point in time. But if the new water filtration plant is designed so that in the event the wheels fall off at a later stage for a Plan B and we have to go to a Plan C, Council would have already designed it and had someone else pay for it.
That's the better part.
Right? Council, meaning Peter, myself and the Mayor and the Deputy Mayor, when we spoke to Melinda Pavey yesterday, made it very clear that we're not interested in being the bunnies for this if it's coming out of the water fees and charges, because there's other people with deeper pockets that could be the people to design and implement something like this. As a consequence, James McTavish, who's the Cross-Border Commissioner, under the emergency provisions, sees this as an emergency, and Council will include any design, if it's deemed, if a business case is deemed, any design and construction as part of the emergency funding such that it doesn't come out of the water fund. That doesn't cost the ratepayers, or technically the charge payers, because water rates aren't water rates, they're water charges, and not everyone in the Shire pays water charges, only those hooked up to mains water supply do. So the state government, obviously, there's not many people that do this. Perth do it. We didn't have enough time to get bottled water from Perth to here to do a blind test with people for tonight, but that was spoken about yesterday as well. I wasn't aware that Perth was recycling their water until yesterday, but they are. So item number 2 is to support further investigations. And by the way, recycled water was already in the drought management plan but wasn't enacted because we had no money to pay for it, and we still haven't. Because council lost $279,000 last year in the water fund. And if it wasn't for the state government supporting us this year, we would have lost a lot more than that this year, because we've spent well over $500,000 so far searching for bores. The state government told the Mayor, Deputy Mayor and myself yesterday that for the first component, which is Part A, which is basically the drilling, they'll pay, and this is old news, they'd pay $372,000 or $373,000, but we got a commitment off the state government yesterday to pay for all of the following stages after stage 1, which means none of the piping, the pumping, the electricity connection, or anything that's required to filter the bore water prior to the new water filtration plant being built, none of that will be paid for by people paying water charges in Tenterfield. If Tenterfield had to pay for it, we'd be looking at another minus $750,000 because it's about 4.372 million. Under the emergency provisions, councils normally have to pay 25%, which means we'd pay about 1.1 million. We haven't got 1.1 million to pay. So the Mayor, the Deputy and myself were very happy yesterday when we heard that in Melinda Pavey's office. That was with Janelle Saffin, the member for Lismore, present. And lastly, in relation to 2, we're not Robinson Crusoe with 2. There's a lot of towns in New South Wales not far behind us with running out of water. The problem the New South Wales government's got, and therefore we've got, is they might be able to truck water to 1 or 2 towns, depending on their size, but if there's multiple towns that run out of water, there isn't going to be enough trucks or trains to get the water in. Now, Tamworth has got a population of 55,000, Dubbo's got a population of 34,000, I don't know what Orange and Bathurst are. There's a train line goes through that direction. They might be able to get water from Sydney to Dubbo. There's no train line coming from south of Tenterfield. There's a train line north to Wallangarra. But we worked out this morning that even if we halve the use of water now from 700,000 litres to 350,000 litres a day, that's a truck every hour and a half. That's not doable. So in the event that we get to 90, 100, 110 days, 126 days, 150 days, and we haven't got bore water, where we get water from, bearing in mind that other towns will get to that D-Day sort of level as well, is anybody's guess. And how it's carted here is also anybody's guess. When Walker went through their water problem, mind you, if you own a water cart on the eastern seaboard and you aren't working 6 days a week, 10 hours a day at the moment, and you're not making money, you'd be a fool, because there's water being carted all around the country and has been for months and months and months. When Walker ran out of water, the 6 B-doubles that we used to cart the water to Walker were from the Barossa Valley, and they're in between the wine harvest. They only had them for 6 weeks, and when it didn't suit the vineyardists from the Barossa, they went back. So let's pick a town. Having a town like Tamworth, getting Tenterfield with only 3,500 people, if it's a truckload every hour and a half, and there's 55,000 people living in Tamworth, you don't need to be a mathematician to work out it's a lot of trucks. So the state government, the reason they're so supportive of towns, and Tenterfield's not the only one, Armidale was in the paper this morning saying they're going to investigate it as well. The reason the state government's so supportive is if multiple towns get to Plan C, there isn't enough infrastructure capacity to address Plan C. Sorry, if multiple towns get to the same situation as us and they haven't got a Plan C, there isn't enough capacity in the state to cover multiple areas at once. Stanthorpe's now carting water. Stanthorpe's one of the beneficiaries, or would be one of the beneficiaries if the New South Wales and Queensland governments can agree on something with New Grid. Stage 1 was a pipe from somewhere down the Mole River to Tenterfield and up to Stanthorpe, which would help secure their future, and whether we like to think it or not, our future, because the Granite Belt, we get 75% of our tourism from further north. If they fail, unless people start going to the Granite Belt, our tourism will be affected. And we can't afford them to fail. The Mole River, as piping from alternate dams, when they finish the studies in 6 months' time, that doesn't mean it's even going to be funded. but at least we'll have something, the requirement to get funding from the federal government, and it'd have to be a federal and state thing, is a detailed business case as contained it's called the P90 estimate form from Infrastructure Australia. Federal Treasury will not release money to the states if it hasn't got a benefit cost ratio greater than 1 as per the specifications for the P90 estimate for Infrastructure Australia. The current Mole River Dam has got a BCR of less than 1 because when Water New South Wales did the design, they only designed it as a downstream irrigation dam, which is why Council keeps referring to New Grid with Mole River Dam as one component of a wider project, because the BCR will skyrocket over 1 as soon as you get water to horticultural versus irrigatable areas, because horticulture supplies a greater value add per unit than what irrigation does, and secure and environmental supply. But piping from alternate dams, we've got to include that in our planning. It's called the Integrated Water Catchment Management Plan, which is going to be part of the approval from the Department of Industry Water for Council's new water filtration plant. We'll include it in it, but piping from alternate dams, there's no assurity that that will happen, although there's every assurity that it'll be planned to happen. Has any councillor got any questions?
Questions to our CE. I'll go down this side. Councillor Sawyer, then I'll go to you, Councillor Murray. Gary.
Thanks, Mr Mayor, through you. It's not so much a question, it's just to clarify. Thank the CEO for such a detailed background to what we're actually considering this morning.
Thank you, Greg.
For me, the key components is that we are being asked to support further investigations of other alternatives. At no stage in this recommendation is it saying a positive vote from council this morning will automatically mean that the water is going to be recycled and put in the dam. This is merely opening up our options from A and B.
That's correct.
To giving us a C with multiple options under C, and I thoroughly endorse it.
Yep. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Brian Murray.
Through you, Mr Mayor, I think we now owe an apology to the people of Tenterfield for that press release, irrespective of how it arrived. This is so detrimental to tourism, house sales in the area, etc., etc. And when you get children coming home from school, as I got a call on Tuesday night, saying they would not drink sewage water anymore, they demanded bottled water. So it's in the schools where our education program should really have started. And I think I recall from a previous meeting here when I said we should publish a column every week. But what happened to that?
I remember your comment, Councillor, from the last council meeting.
Did that eventuate?
Not at the moment. It will be.
So I'd like to move a motion that we did put out an apology to the people of this town.
For that article in the Sunday Telegraph.
Yes. For the interpretation of that article, yes.
I'll come back to you with that, Councillor. Councillor Verry.
Can I make a few comments about recycled water?
We're dealing with number 2.
Yeah.
Yep, it's there.
Okay. Now, with our dam, I don't know what the evaporation rate here is, but at Applethorpe it's around over a metre. I'm pretty sure it'd be probably more here. And at present, I'd just love to turn on the tap and have good, clean drinking water. At the moment at home, after that rain event, we had 27 mils, and I pump into a high tank, which we recycle back, runs back to the house. All the smoke on the roof made the water virtually undrinkable, plus the bushfires, everybody up there had smoky water. So the water was virtually undrinkable. And I've got no hassle at all about drinking recycled water. In the 60s, when I lived on the Severn River, Stanthorpe used to dump all its, I think it was treated as C class, which is virtually poisonous. They dump in the Severn River. By the time it ran downstream to where we lived, it was drinkable. not that we drank it because we had tank water, but we did drink that water. When we ran out of other water, you're on the creek, you're thirsty, you had a bloody drink. And nobody worried about it. It was only when we started getting airy-fairy with ourselves, we started thinking about recycle or how dreadful is recycled water. But everybody living downstream from a major town that was on the west of the Divide drank recycled water. And it was only ever treated to C-class is only when they just remove the solids and dump it in the water, isn't it?
They actually call them primary, secondary and tertiary. So primary is just basically screened.
Yep.
Secondary is settled and tertiary is chlorinated or UV treated.
Yeah, well, it's only secondary treated. So you didn't have any logs playing in the creek. But on the creek banks you had a lush vegetation because of all the nitrogen and fertiliser that was still left in the... and that disappeared after about 3 miles. So it was all gone by then.
Yeah, it doesn't take long for the
No,
nutrients to
so
come out.
I ideally love these wetlands. They work really well. And anybody who's lived in the bush has had a drink out in a paddock somewhere and you go upstream, there's a bloody dead cow or something in the river. I mean, get over it. In my opinion, it's
A lot
the
of
people that are
got
against
sick
us, get over
doing
it.
that.
Now, that water that came out of Stanthorpe at that time was used for irrigation. It irrigated all sorts of crops. And so much so, some of the crops were actually affected by what, especially close to the town, were actually affected by the what was in the water, whether it be pesticides or whatever, I don't know. Nobody ever tested it those days. But now they actually, I think they do the last stages, and they sell that to the growers to irrigate with. And that's damn sight better than what we'd get into the dam, not as good as what we'd get into the dam. So, I've got no problem with putting this water in the dam when we've got it. I think the sooner we do it, the better. Now, there's an old bush saying that water's cleaned after a mile or so, irrespective of what's in the water. And we Australians live by that. I did think we should have a Plan D as well. And Plan D is a dam on the Bunnabanoo, which can be gravity fed into Tenterfield. I think that's something we should look at. And the Plan D with this water grid should include, forget Emu Swamp, there's one on Nundubbermere which would be nearly as big as Glen Lyon. It's about 175,000 megalitres. So, these things should be looked at now. And now's the time to do it. As John Barilaro said to me, he said, if we don't build dams now, we'll never build them. So that's my comments, anyway.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor McNish.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. Just
Apologise. Councillor McNish, just wants to make a comment. Councillor Very. Apologise.
Through you, Mr Mayor, the and piping from alternate dams, the S was quite deliberate because the Mole River Dam or New Grid's only one dam, but the recommendation to council is piping from alternate dams, plural, meaning that as is normally the case with business cases and investigations, catchments near the prime catchment that you're looking at, in this instance Mole River, could also be included in the scope quite easily, which is why it was dam plural. Thanks, Gary.
Thanks for your comments, Councillor. I will go to Councillor McNish, Councillor Rogan, and back to you, Councillor Peters. Councillor McNish.
just a couple of comments and one question. Mr Mayor, with the dam, I really applaud the state government for doing what they're doing. It was only a few months ago we had a couple of consultants from here.
Yep.
We were told that it would take at least 5 years to do a cost-benefit analysis on the Mole River Dam.
Yep.
Before any tenders or design works were called for, which would probably make it a 7 or 8 to 10-year project. So I applaud them for realise the urgency of this, and something's going to, one good thing that's going to come out of this drought is that dams and that will be built.
Well said, Councillor.
Secondly, just on what Brian just mentioned there, I agree with the sentiments. I've had similar questions myself, but an apology, that's almost an admission of guilt.
Councillor McNish, with respect, I'll go back to the councillor, which I indicated.
Okay, the third question was about the new water filtration plant. Now, Terry said they've been designed at the moment. That means inherently it's going to take a long time by the time you get consultants in, consultants out, design the new water filtration plant. 2 years, councillor. 2 years.
Yep.
Terry told us some time ago that you could almost buy these things off the shelf. And, you know, you say what you want, and they come in a container on the back of a low loader or whatever, and they just get plumbed in.
Yep.
Why do we have to go through all the design and everything else, I suppose physically to fit in the building, perhaps, I don't know. So if Terry can answer that, I would be very pleased.
Thank you, councillor. CEO will reply.
Through you, Mr Mayor, yes, you're 100% correct. They're called reverse osmosis plants. They're one of many instruments that can be used to filter water, subject to what is in the tested water. Reverse osmosis plants waste between 20 and 30% water, and they're very, very high in power use, but they're a plug and play. All military forces use reverse osmosis plants. You wouldn't see the United States Army rock up to Iraq and ring up Saddam Hussein and say, oh, by the way, we've got 100,000 troops in the desert and they're thirsty. One of the first things they do is, and Councillor Reagan will be well aware of this, being in the military for so long, one of the first things they do is ensure that there's a supply chain, including water. I've showed a few councillors, pictures of RAAF Hercules delivering, they're called package plants. I put in a 1,200 person package plant when I was Director of Engineering in Port Hedland, at Port Hedland International Airport, for a 1,200 person accommodation village, and it was very, very simple. Judging from my debrief from Tuesday's meeting this week, the idea is that the Department of Health have looked at the preliminary test results, and the fluoride level from the bores at the moment will be sitting around 1.8. They want us to get it below 1.5 before it'll go through our system. What it would mean is not putting all of the dam water through a reverse osmosis plant, but some of it, so that if we, I think it was 25%, wasn't it, Julian? Yeah, so if a quarter of the water from the dam went through an RO plant, we'd only lose 20% of a quarter, not 20% of everything that went through the filtration plant. It would knock off 0.3 of a part per million off the fluoride to get it down to 1.5. Then the water that's gone through an RO plant would then rejoin the water that's come through a new conventional water filtration plant downstream, and the filtered fluoride would be at a level of 1.5 parts per million. So yes, I could make, apart from the fact under the local government you can't do it, if I was in private enterprise and I was a mining company and I had 4,500 people in a camp making iron ore, I could make one phone call, comes up in 1,500 people lot, so I'd need 3 machines. You could have it delivered to east of Port Hedland in 24 hours from a company called ABCO Water Systems. I've showed the Mayor, the Deputy Mayor and a few other people their website. Murray Brown used to own it, he's probably dead now, he was in the mid-70s when I knew him. But it's very possible to do. If in the event that our filtration plant fails, because at the moment 68% of the water that council is using is coming out of Shirley Park Bore, which is high in fluoride, and some other stuff too, molybdenum. If the shandy gets down so low that the shandy, the proportionate of the water that's left in the dam mixed with the bore water, means that the filtration plant can't keep the fluoride level below the Australian Drinking Water Guidelines, we will need to put some reverse osmosis plants in as a temporary measure anyway, straight away, within the next 126 days if we get down that low. The filtration plant probably won't cope with the water when it gets to about 11.7% depth, and we may need to put it through RO plants then anyway and put the water back into the dam. but it's a diminishing rate of return, because the more dirty the dam gets, the harder it is to filter. And really, by the time we get to that stage, we're really clutching at straws, and we'd be having to truck it in. But let's hope we don't get to that stage. But you can do it. It's expensive. It's not that efficient, because you waste 20% of water. But in the worst case scenario, in the next 126 days, we may have to do it.
With respect, Mr Mayor, the only way answer the question, Terry. So, the reverse osmosis is a separate filtration plant to the other one, is it?
Yes. Through you, Mr Mayor, we've got one already. Rural Aid gave us a reverse osmosis plant.
Yep.
We're using that to refilter the water that goes through the...
It's from straight from the pool.
Yeah. To lower the risk to the shandy, because the bore water, 1.8 fluoride? The bore water's over the Australian Drinking Water Guidelines in fluoride. So we put it through the reverse osmosis plant to drop it, so that we don't put too much fluoride into the dam water, because the old water filtration plant doesn't take much out. So yes, we can do it. We could put 6, 4, however many is required to do it, and we could do it very, very quickly. They're not that efficient, because you lose 20% of your water, and they suck a lot of electricity, because basically what you're doing is you're squeezing water through very, very small membranes, and it takes a lot of energy to get the water to go through the holes.
Before I go to you, Councillor Reagan, Councillor Condition, and I commend you on your questions, and I just want to remind councillors and I take a minute of the process we've been through here. Prior to the state government election, this council was announced and successful in gaining a $7 million grant to build a new water filtration system. Prior to that, the government had a huge amount of money on offer for this to happen. The staff and this council, led by a CE, done an outstanding job to do this document. It was as thick as War and Peace. I've seen the document, what they had to send back. Then we be successful in gaining that funding, and it's a $9.3 or $9.7 million job.
7 million, sorry, it's 9.3 million,
Yep.
but 7 million of it's funded by the state.
Anyway, so Councillor, yes, we all need to be reminded of the success council's had there. Right at the very moment, and starting several months ago, council has been pushing the state government. Minister Pave has been outstanding. It's what sits below her is frustrating this council with the lack of activity, John. And it hasn't. It's driven our CE mad. They've been waiting for months to get a reply. This is what started this whole conversation, to do with the report in Sunday's paper, everything, to do with the new, we want to go to tender for design, so we can build this thing within 2 years. That's what it's all about, to get it up and running. A permanent, brand new, state-of-the-art water filtration system. We will have spent $20 million out there. We've done the damn wall, new water filtration system, happy days. That's what good councils do. And I commend all the council over this period of this council and how supportive you have been in that, because we're dealing with a lot of money here.
Don't get me wrong, I'm not complaining.
I wasn't challenging the council, I just wanted to remind us of all the path we're going down.
I realise that.
Yeah. So thank you. Councillor Reagan.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Through you, I'd just like to thank the CE for the detailed explanation we received.
He couldn't pronounce Billerumba right, but no, he will get it right.
I can't pronounce better.
And it was quite detailed, but look, item 2 is what we're talking about. So, and I think it's pretty self-explanatory, and I'd be fully supportive of further investigation, like the Deputy Mayor said, of all the possibilities, even some that we haven't thought of yet, because the situation's quite dire. So that's a given, and I have no issue with that, fully supportive. I'd just like to ask a couple of questions.
Questions,
through you of the CE of a current situation, that's all.
Yep.
So through you, Mr Mayor, to the CE, the recent rain last Friday night was about 17 mil or something like that. I haven't heard what sort of effect that's had on the catchment and on the levels in the dam, as far as the level and as far as the turbidity goes. Did that have an effect?
Through you, Mr Mayor, almost by accident, myself, Councillor Bronwyn Petrie, and David, and David Wolferton, we wrote to Janelle Saffin about 2 weeks ago saying that if we get rain, the turbidity will go up and our plant won't be able to filter it. It was a lay down, it was a given. Janelle Saffin wrote to the Minister for Emergency Services, the Minister for Water and the Minister for Communities, and I can't remember what his name is, saying that Tenterfield Council has informed her of a potential risk, and can the state government come to our rescue because we haven't got the money to go and put all the silt traps and silt control in the catchment because it was a massive job. Last Thursday, about 20 past 10, I got a phone call from someone, I can't remember who it was, saying that Soilcons turned up and they want access to all the properties around the dam to put risk mitigation measures in to stop the soot and the ash going to the dam if it rains again. So I contacted Councillor Bronwyn Petrie, who lives out that way and who I knew would know everybody on a first name basis to be able to go and get instant access, because we had no warning that they were going to do this at all. And I was extraordinarily sceptical that they'd be successful, because one person turned up with a ute with 2 rolls of geofabric on the top and a sledgehammer and a heap of pegs in the back, and I thought, this is bloody hopeless. What I didn't know is that, and his name was Clayton, he turned up with a chequebook, and he hired everyone that was available straight away. There was 2 excavators out there almost immediately, bought a heap of rock from the quarry, and in less than 48 hours, he got all the erosion control put in everywhere. It was unbelievable, and I've asked through the Cross-Border Commissioner that he be sent a letter from the Office of Emergency Management thanking him for his expertise. It was incredible. So on the Friday when we were there, we knew where the water level was on the edge of the dam because we're looking at where the erosion thingos were going to go in. It would appear after the rain that it came back about 5 metres. Now, from my calculations, I think it went up about 20 mil. At our current rate of evaporation only, not of use, but just of evaporation, we're losing between 4.6 and 8.6 millimetres a day. So that little bit of rain we got on that Friday night basically brought us 3 days of evaporation, not 3 days of use, because we're losing minus 225,000 litres a day of use, but we're losing wind-borne evaporation on top of that. So that brought us 3 evaporative days, maybe 4 if we had a low evaporative day, nothing more. I heard through the office of Melinda Pavey, the office of the Minister for Water, that Channel 9 made a comment that brought us 50 days. I would love it to have brought us 50 days. I intend to go up and have a look at the dam either today or tomorrow. I suspect we'd be well and truly back to where we were last Friday, or maybe even a little bit before. The beauty about the rain, though, is it's settling the catchment down. The more light showers we get, not a gully raker, the greater the chance the catchment will have to start normalising so that we can get the turbidity down. And I haven't asked since I've been back, what's the turbidity level yesterday, Gillian?
We did have some spikes early in the day.
Do you want to use your speaker?
Please.
We did have some spikes early in the day, so the turbidity was up at 1 again, and we've managed to get it down to 0.4 yesterday, and I'm just waiting on some readings for this morning to see how it's going today, but I believe it's settled down.
Okay.
Councillor Reagan, you've indicated you have another question.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Actually 2, but they're quick ones.
Pay though.
I'm not talking about the answers.
No, it's all good.
No, you'll never get a quick answer.
So the first bore at the archery grounds, which has got water in there, sitting there, and it's not being used or commissioned or put in operation, is it going to be? Because I believe it would produce, I think it was
3.1.
3.1.
Yeah, Now, that must be helpful. I understand you're waiting to see if there's better, or is it just the cost? I just don't understand why that can't get into commission quickly. It's got to be helpful. If Apex Park is producing 68%, what comes out of that bore out there has got to bring that closer.
Shirley Park, councillor.
Sorry, Shirley Park.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, good question, councillor.
Yeah, David, can you update me on how we're going with the temporary pumping at? Yeah. Oh, you can, Gillian?
Thank you, Gillian.
You got a speaker.
Yep, so with the artery, we've already got the pipe waiting to go. We still have to wait for the actual production licence before we use a lot of that water, but we've got pumps ordered, so as soon as things come in. We've also got Essential Energy ready to go to put in power for that. We may have to go solar temporarily, and because it might take, because of granite, as you know, up there, they need a special drill rig to be able to do the posts. But I'm working with all of them to get it together. So
Councillor, can I just comment there, because our Manager of Water and Waste has just raised a really good point, which I referred to before. Waiting. That is what this staff goes through all the time when we're dealing with this water. That is what's so frustrating. Everything's ready to rock and roll, councillor, but to get the approval to have that as a go from a test bore to a permanent bore, just tick it off and let's get going. The Minister, she's been outstanding, but she can't do it every day and drive around and tap people on the shoulder and say, respond to these people. They're 9 to 5 workers, and I say that with respect, but they need to lift their game big time. And we refer to that with the Minister all the time, and I see he does an outstanding job there. Okay, another question, councillor?
Thank you, and thanks for that. Yeah, this one is a quick one. Apex Park bore this time.
Yep.
I heard the other day it was out of action for a while. Is that operating again?
Very short time, councillor.
Thank you.
We just needed to recharge the batteries. Councillor Tom Peters. Question to do with number 2, councillor, or?
Just a comment, Mr Mayor, just through you.
Yep.
When I was in England, I drank the water in London. I had no problem with it being recycled 7 times. It seemed to be perfect. It's a lot better than their beer. I prefer the water to their beer. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor. Right, councillor, out of respect, councillor Moe, you've indicated that you want to move a motion about an apology. Do you want to formulate that, councillor?
Just a simple motion to say that we're sorry that this has occurred, and we're trying to address it, yeah, very simply.
Well, when you're saying, please respect, but when you're saying that this has occurred, referring to the article in the paper, or?
In the paper.
Okay.
Yes. Because somewhere, I take it was the CEO who, you put out a press release, obviously, to that.
Straight after. Straight after. On Sunday.
On Sunday.
Yep.
No, prior to that. You put out a press release prior to that, did you not?
Yep.
Through you, Mr Mayor, the Mayor and myself met with Jack Morford for about an hour on site on the dam, and then later on in the day, an hour and a half in my office.
Yep.
Went through all the detail, of which the recycling component was very minor. Mr Morford decided to write a story solely about the recycling, not about all the other things we're doing. We took him and showed him, I'll call it Steinbrook Road because I can't pronounce Billy Willinga. Steinbrook Road, we showed him where the water comes out of the bore. We took him to the plant. We took him throughout town. We even drew him diagrams of what was going on.
Thank you.
And all that went out the window because it wasn't sensational enough for his story. So, yes, and as I said at the beginning of the conversation, we normally, that's normally not how our media goes out. Normally what happens, we've got a list, I don't know how many there are on the list, there's probably about 20? There's normally 20 media outlets that we tick the box on top of the media releases, and we do a normal release. We were requested from the Minister's office to meet with Mr Morford on multiple occasions, as he was a good guy. It turned out that he was a little bit duplicitous, toilet to tap versus, as the audience and the councillors have heard, versus the huge amount of things we're doing at the moment. was quite inflammatory.
Councillors, so just a bit of a tidy up with our meeting procedure. Councillor Murray, please respect what I'm going to do. We need to just tidy up. We've dealt with number 2. So, Councillor, I'm just going to sit with you for a moment. We need to deal with number 2. So, Councillors, because we have separated and voted on because there's an amendment with those date changes. So we'll do number 2, that Council supports further investigation as described in the drought management plan into alternate water sources, including recycled water, urban stormwater runoff, and piping from alternate dams. So we're going to accept that as a different part of this report and the officer's recommendation. All in favour? Again? Carried. Thank you, councillors. Now, Councillor Murray, I'll go to you. I apologise.
Can we have that recorded as unanimous decision?
Yep. Of course we can. Thank you, Councillor Verwey. So, Councillor Murray, to do with your motion, so it's the council is sorry that the article in the Sunday Telegraph has occurred, and you need to work with Nolan here, because I'm going to get your wording before I ask for a second, okay?
Yeah. Sorry for any inconveniences that must have caused, and we don't quite know yet what inconvenience this has caused. When you throw mud out there, some of it definitely sticks. So we are at this point in time labelled.
Right. Can we just...
It's very hard and very difficult to, because it's a highly sensitive issue.
Yeah. Councillor, what I'll do, you're moving the motion,
Yeah.
so
So stick
just save your passion and sit on that for a moment with respect. We need to just work with the wording how you want this worded, please. The council is sorry for any inconvenience that the article in the Sunday Telegraph has caused,
that may have caused.
may have caused.
Flowing, oh, sorry, Nolly.
You're right.
Flowing from the article in the, what paper was it? I didn't see the article. but-
You couldn't buy one. I had to borrow one.
Oh, there you go. That tells you something. They had a success.
Oh, mate, outstanding.
That this may
So you're
have,
happy with maybe just that, is that what you...
yes, yeah.
The council is sorry for the inconvenience that the article in the Sunday Telegraph may have caused,
To the residents of Tenterfield.
and businesses.
And of course, to all people.
Okay, councillor, just a suggestion, do you want to change to, where we're reading, sorry for any inconvenience, change the inconvenience to?
Anxiety.
Anxiety?
Yes, I'm happy to go along with
Okay,
that.
righto. So councillor, as brief as it is, are you happy with that, with the wording of that on the screen there now?
So, for any anxiety that the article in the Sunday Telegraph may have caused to the residents and businesses of Tenterfield. Yes,
Yep.
I'll take that.
Okay. Do we have a seconder for that motion? No, I'm sorry, no.
I just wanted to let you know, it was actually in the Sunday Mail in Brisbane
Right.
and the Herald
Yeah.
Sun in Melbourne.
Okay, thank you.
So you've got-
Yep, it's all right. We're dealing with that. I will ask for a seconder. Councillor Verwey will second it. Righto. Okay, Councillor Murray, your motion. Do you want to speak to the motion?
Well, put simply, yes, I do want to speak to the motion. I think it was, no disrespect, Terry,
Yep.
but it was just, you do not talk to tabloids, generally speaking. You don't talk to press in such a sensitive area as this one. I mean, we look back to Toowoomba 20 years ago, and you see what happened there. They took to the streets. So, leading on from there, absolutely. Getting back to John's remark there about guilt, there's no guilt attached to this. I mean, it's happened, it's done, it's finished. So there's nothing more to say about this. So I've got nothing more to say about it.
Well, Councillor, we'll come back for your closing comment, and you're quite entitled to that. Councillor Sewell, are you speaking against the motion or for the motion?
Against the motion.
Yeah, Councillor, I'll accept that. As a speaker for and a speaker against.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Whilst I know that the community of Tenterfield is owed an apology over the anxiety, Tenterfield Shire Council is not responsible for the anxiety that was caused. The journalist is responsible
Totally
for the
agree.
anxiety. He's gone rogue to put a headline up that suited himself and his employer. We immediately put out a press release detailing exactly how that all unfolded. The community is aware that it was a stuff-up from the paper, and we've gone to great lengths in the meantime to identify who caused the anxiety. We've done an outstanding organisation, and when I say we, I'm talking about the people that work for this organisation, not us at the top of this table. They don't deserve to have to make an apology for something that's nothing to do with them. If we issue an apology as an organisation, we're saying our employees stuffed up, and they bloody well didn't.
Thank you, councillor. Councillor Verwin, seconder of the motion. Do you wish to speak for the motion?
No, I just second it up to Councillor Murray, have his say.
God love you, councillor Berry. Thank you. Is there any other speakers for the motion? Councillor McGish, you speaking for the motion?
Yeah, I've got two minds here, Mr Mayor. I agree with the sentiment of it, but once again, I will reiterate, there is a certain percentage of the population who are looking for any excuse to knock council, and this would give them more ammunition. I don't know which way to vote.
Oh, well, I take that you're speaking against it, but anyway.
Yep, okay. I still don't know which way to vote.
I don't know. Okay. Any other speakers? Councillor Bob Logan, you speaking for or against?
Against it.
Well, councillor, to be fair, I can't. It needs to be 1 for, 1 against, or 2 for. That's 2 against. Well, he's offensive, but I've made a call. That's against to me. So I apologise, councillor. I am going to put the motion. And councillor Moe, do you wish to have some closing comment?
Through you, Mr Mayor, no, I've got no further comment. I think I've said what I wanted to say.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you, councillor. Okay, councillors, the motion says moved by councillor Brian Murray, second by councillor Verry, that council is sorry for any anxiety that the article in the Sunday Telegraph may have caused to the residents and businesses of Tenterfield. All in favour? Against? Motion's lost.
Can I call for a division?
It's not a planning matter, councillor.
Okay.
Can you apologise? You can.
Register of votes.
Okay, we'll call it that. Okay, so for the motions, councillor Murray. Against the motions, councillor Rogan. Please put your hands up. Councillor Rogan, councillor Sawyer, councillor Petty, councillor Verry, councillor Tom Peters, councillor Forbes, councillor McNish. To do with, councillor?
Sort of on that motion.
Yeah.
At the public meeting tonight, it might be a good idea to start off with an apology for the way the article was written, and then perhaps explain the whole process, how you spoke for 2 hours, 2.5 hours, and this was only a small part of it, and that the paper decided to sensationalise it all and cause the anxiety that it did. And council is very, very aware of that. That might be a good way to start the meeting tonight, and just lay that to rest straight away. Let's just carry on. Brian gave me the idea to sort of to come up with that. So it's sort of the same thing, but it's in a different form.
Yep. Thank you, councillor. Okay, councillors. So the officer's recommendation, we've moved the Rockmead recommendation as a whole. It's all done, no?
It's all done.
Okay. So that's all done, councillor. We come to the end of the meeting. I thank you all very much for your attendance. I thank the gallery for their attendance, and the meeting is ended. In peace and harmony. And I wish you well. That's good.